Welcome back to the Packet Lab. Today we're going to take a look at using a Cisco device as a TFTP server. Before we get into the TFTP server command, I want to do a real quick review of TFTP versus FTP. Don't have a slide up for this, so you're just going to have to listen to my boring ass voice. Both are file transfer protocols. That's what the FTP stands for. TFTP stands for Trivial File Transfer Protocol, so you can guess between the two of them which one is less reliable. TFTP uses UDP, which is connectionless. FTP uses TCP, which is connectionful, connection oriented, connection based, whatever description you want to use. Anyways, FTP is described as quote unquote reliable, whereas TFTP is not. The ports that it uses, FTP uses a single port, it's UDP port 69, whereas FTP uses two ports, TCP port 21 for the connection and TCP port 20 for the data transfer, and actually that's not quite comprehensive because depending on whether you're using active or passive FTP, or even there's secure FTP, blah blah blah, that's a discussion for another day. Just those are the two primary ports that are used with the vanilla flavor of FTP. Probably the biggest difference is that FTP uses a username password, so you have to authenticate to the FTP server in order to get your data out of it, whereas TFTP does not. So once you get a TFTP server set up, you don't have to authenticate to get in there. So there's a little bit of protection you can put on there, with access lists, but as far as credentials, username, password, that does not exist in the TFTP world. So that's a whirlwind brief review of the differences between TFTP and FTP. Generally, you prefer FTP over TFTP because it's reliable, connection-based, and it has credentials. So we can transform our Cisco device into a makeshift TFTP server, and the way that we do that is we use the TFTP server command in global configuration mode. And as you can see here, this is output from a 2610 XM. What you're going to do is you're going to type in the TFTP server command. There is a hyphen between there, and then you're going to specify the storage location that you're going to use. And depending on your platform, you may have a grip more of these than I do. In this case, I've got flash, basically NVRAM system. Null means nothing. We'll show uses for that in later lessons. So what we're going to be doing in this lesson is we're going to be showing how to share out images, but know that you can share out configurations. Anything that's in these storage areas you can share out. So it could be configurations, it could be iOS images, it could be ASCII prawn if you're into that, whatever your little heart desires. One small caveat, and it could be considered a security feature if you want to give it that grandiose of a title, is that you have to share out specific files. So you can't do a TFTP server flash and then just by default, if all the files on flash are shared out, you have to actually specify the file. So in this case, what I did was I did a show flash to find out what image I have in there. I have this image right here, this 12.3.26, and to share that I specified TFTP server and then the specific file name. And there really isn't a verification command. There is no show TFTP server to show what files you're currently sharing out. You will have to have access to the running configuration to verify this, so you would just do a show running configuration and then pipe include TFTP, and that should show all the files that you're sharing out. Because that is another thing I guess I should touch on, is that you can share out multiple files. So if you have 5 or 6 iOS images in your flash, you can share them out, but you do have to specify them individually. So you would issue multiple TFTP server flash with the image specified commands. As you can see, it's ridiculously easy to set up a Cisco device as a TFTP server. So the next part of the equation is, how do I get this file from the device that I've specified as my TFTP server to the device that needs that file? In this case, we'll call it the receiving device. And we're going to use a variation of the copy command. And basically with the copy command, you say, I want to copy this file from this source to this destination. And as you can see here, we just specify that we're going to use TFTP, and then in this case, we're going to store it to our flash. And you could put all this information on one line if you'd like to. In this case, we're just going to specify the source and the destination and let the Cisco iOS dialog walk us through the rest of it. So it's going to ask you for the remote host, which in this case is going to be our TFTP server. I gave it the IP address, and then the source file name, which is going to be the iOS image that we're going to be sharing out on that source. And then finally the destination, and generally it will guess that you're going to use the same name for the destination, and in that case we are. bar, you could specify this, or if you have during the dialog, if it's got something within brackets, I guess, then that means that's what it expects as the answer. So if you just hit enter, it will use that value. And you can see here it's going out to 10.1.12.1 via TFTP, and it's looking for that image that we specified. This may not come up. This is on the 2600. Just be aware that it could come up. A lot of times we just hit enter, because we've done this a million times, and I've been screwed on this before with 2600s and 2500s. The older Cisco platforms generally will ask you, do you want to erase flash before copying? Well, you better be sure that you want to erase flash, because as you note here, within the brackets is confirmed. So if you hit an enter here without thinking, that's telling the router that you're saying, yeah, let's go ahead and erase that. And if you do choose yes, it'll erase it, and you'll see a series of E's, and then it'll go ahead with its mission, which in this case is downloading that file. And we can see it's loading, and you'll get this series of bangs or exclamation marks. If there's an issue, you'll probably see like a dot, almost like a ping. We're used to this format. You see a dot or a couple of dots, that might be something to worry about. You're not going to be watching this every character that comes through, but at the end, when you get to this point where it's downloaded, you might want to just scroll up and see if you had any issues there, because it will show like dots instead of bangs, and that means it probably missed a couple of chunks. It'll run a checksum. That's telling itself that it's okay. Don't know how accurate that is. And it'll show you the number of bytes. It'll tell you how long it took, the speed, big deal. But it's nice to take a look at this figure and make sure that it matches what you expect it to match. Okay, so here's some of the options with TFTP server. I probably could have had this slide a little bit earlier, but I wanted to show you the copy feature before I got into this. So by default, if we remember back to my little review in the first slide, TFTP doesn't really have any security to it. Once you specify this file is shared out via TFTP, anybody that knows the host name or IP address of this device can get this file. There's no validations. It's not saying, oh, you need to log in with, username, foo, password, bar. It's just saying, if you can get to me, I'm sharing this out. Not a lot exciting there. It's like, ooh, I got a 2600 image. Wow, I've cracked your network security. Nothing big there. Problem isn't with getting this file. Problem is that you have UDP port 69 open on this device. And in networking, we like to only make our holes as big as necessary and only keep them open for as long as necessary. So if you're going to be using this TFTP server and it's going to be something that's semi-permanent, or even if you're just want to make sure that you've got an extra layer of security, you can specify an access list on here. So you can specify at the end of this an access list and just say only these hosts should be able to get here. And this is a good idea, especially if you're going to have this up for any amount of time, and I'll show you an example of when you might do that a little bit later here. But if you just issue TFTP server and then the file name, and you don't specify an access list, anybody that can hit your router or switch, whichever you're using here, your Cisco device, let's just go with that verbiage, can get to this file. So like I said, the first thing you want to do is only open this up for as long as you need to. So when you're done, just issue the no TFTP server, and that will get rid of the TFTP access to this file. But what you can do, like I said, is create an access list. In this case, I'm only going to permit the host with the IP address 100.1.12.11. In this case, R1 is going to be accessing this for the file, but its IP address ends with a .1. Because we have an implicit deny at the end of this access list, we're saying nobody else except for the device at the .11 address can access this file via TFTP. So now if we go over back to R1 and we try and copy TFTP flash to this is a partition. Again, I'm using old equipment here, but so don't let this throw you off. You may never see this. Basically, it's saying the second partition on the flash. So if we go ahead and go through our normal steps, specify the remote TFTP server, and then the file name that we want. Now in this case, I already have it on there, not a big deal. Do you want to overwrite? In this case, I chose yes, but it's not going to do it because it's going to go out there before it overwrites anything. It's going to go out there and make sure that it can get this file. And it's not going to tell you blocked or access list or hey buddy, you're not allowed. It's just going to say error opening TFTP file at blah blah blah, no such file or directory. And you'll get this if you put in the wrong address or the wrong file name, you get the same output. So it doesn't tell you a whole lot, but what we've done on R2 is because this is coming from it's coming from this IP address, it's not being allowed because we're only allowing TFTP from this address. And you could set this up per TFTP server statement. So you could have different images or different files that you share out with different access lists, so certain hosts can get to certain files. You can make this as complicated as you want. My suggestion is that when you're done sharing this, because generally you don't want to be using this as your primary image or file sharing method, when you're done with this, just go ahead and make sure that you take this out of the config by putting a no in front of this command.